Hey guys, Lucas here, Vintage Surplus, and today we're going to I'm going to talk about something that kind of irritates me, and that is when people bash on military surplus and just the latest and greatest military gear, and they go, it's junk, because it's made by the lowest bidder. So we're going to talk about that. Is it true? And we're going to start off with sometimes, in certain applications. And then, what that means, and then why even the lowest bidder doesn't mean it's junk by any means at all. And then, so you can think about that. If you're one of these kind of people that thinks that, hopefully this kind of hopefully educates you a little bit. If it doesn't change your mind, it doesn't change your mind. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm just here to educate. So we'll talk about it a little bit. So, does the government want to buy stuff at the lowest cost? Well, yeah. They're going to want to buy stuff as cheap as possible and still get the job done. So they're going to put out RFIs, RFPs, whatever you want to call it. Be like, I need this many of this item. Who can give it to me? And some companies are going to come out and be like, okay, here, I can give this to you for this amount, and I can give you this many. And they're going to be like, okay, cool. And then sometimes they'll pick that. Someone that says, I can make it for 5 cents. Sometimes they're going to pick the person that says they can make it for 10 cents. It just depends on, who it is and what the item is. So you got to think about it, though, like when the U.S. government, the DOD, U.S. Army, Marine Corps, whatever it is, buys even one pouch, the U.S. Army, active component and reserve component, is hundreds of thousands of people. So they got to buy hundreds of thousands of that one item potentially, especially if it's general issue. So if you got to buy a general issue item, you're going to want, that to meet certain criteria, but still be cost effective because, you can't buy $300 pouches, for everybody. So they want, they have to make it certain costs. They're going to demand a certain cost, everything like that. What goes into that cost though? So when the government makes something, they want something, like obviously printer paper is printer paper, pens are pens. Some of those we get are kind of, the Skillcraft stuff leaves stuff to be desired at times. But at the end of the day, it still meets, it's a pen, it works, it does work, it's good to go. For a pouch, for a piece of clothing, for a backpack, for anything vehicle related, anything like that, like anything that's actually being used and is in a combat environment, communications equipment, electronics, night vision, all that stuff. Sometimes they are paying the lowest bidder for that item, but you gotta think what goes in there. For a pouch, piece of clothing, anything like that, it's the material itself has to meet certain criteria and specifications. Abrasion resistance, fading resistance, drying times. If it's a pouch or piece of clothing or anything like that, it has to be sewn in a certain way to resist like tearing. So that is, that $10 military pouch they pay for $10 might actually be a $300 item on the civilian side. So they need that cost down though because they're buying 300,000 of them. Think how many ACU pouches or UCP pouches are out of there. We think, a lot of guys don't think really good things about UCP because it performed adequately at best along, most environments. It was not universal. But that material that made the UCP is really good material because it had to be abrasion resistant. Like those are really durable pouches. Like the camo might not be the best thing in the world, but that pouch can go through hell and back. The stitching can go through hell and back. It's fading resistant. It's tear resistant. Dries all right, depending on what material it is and what kind of pouch it is. The dry time is good. The stitching is good. It's going to last a while still, even though they might have bought it for relatively cheap cost because they bought so many of them. So think about that when you think about lowest bidder, all that nonsense. Think about the scale of application when they're buying something. Some things they don't go to lowest bidder. They're like, I just need this. Give. And they're like, okay, we'll pay whatever for it. Or they're like, well, we can, afford this or whatever they need be. Cryo precision uniforms, I doubt they're getting them for $10 a piece. They're getting them for, a little more than that probably. Stuff like that. So when you think about the lowest bidder aspect of it, it is true, and it's true across the government as a whole. It's true for a lot of companies. When they ask for something, they want to be able to afford it well and save money if they can. It doesn't just hold true for the government and the military in general. It holds true for everybody. Nobody wants to pay the $100 for the same item they get for $5. So think about that. Obviously, there's probably some more to go into and think about at the end of the day because material cost is expensive. Textiles are not a cheap thing. Textiles have always been expensive from the beginning of time. If you're buying something made out of fabric, material, anything like that, it's never going to be cheap. So you're going to pay a certain amount no matter what. But yeah. So hopefully, if you heard this before, you didn't know what it means, explained a little bit into that so you can see that it doesn't always just ring true that it's junk. Sometimes stuff isn't the greatest quality. Got it. But at the end of the day, if it's going to be used in a combat environment, unless it's just like a hasty kind of thing, it's going to meet a lot of different criteria and requirements. For example, look up a mil spec requirement. Go look up like a mil per mil spec, anything like that. Look at some of those requirements that a material needs to meet, and think about how cheap that can't be. That can't be cheap to make, to manufacture, to research, develop, and then produce. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are below on this one. If you disagree with me wholeheartedly, more than welcome. Let me know what you think. This changed your mind. I'm not here to change minds, just here to educate. But if it did change your mind, that's cool. Good.